Welcome back to the Whispers in the Dark True Horror Stories channel. Today, we will explore the chilling mysteries hidden within abandoned buildings. These places are filled only with silence, dust, and the haunting memories that remain. In the darkness of these cold walls, you may hear whispers, strange sounds that cannot be explained. Are they the unseen remnants of the past, or simply an imagination running wild? Get ready, because today, we will delve into the terrifying tales from the nightmares in abandoned buildings. Story 1: The Whispering Walls. My name is Peter, and I've always been obsessed with old buildings and abandoned places. Since I was a child, I've had a fascination with exploring forgotten places, abandoned lots, and buildings that carry histories lost to time. My current job is an urban explorer, someone who ventures into areas that most people wouldn't dare. I'm not a professional explorer, but I have experience and a deep passion for places that seem to have been forgotten by the world. One cold autumn morning, I received a call from a group of historical researchers. They asked me to visit an abandoned location, an old school building that had been deserted since the 1950s. This school was located on the outskirts of town, and it had a mysterious history behind it. The documents the research team gave me stated that after a terrible, inexplicable event, the building was abandoned and no one dared to go near it. Stories of supernatural occurrences, of spirits trapped within its walls, had become part of the local legend. But I considered these just rumors, unsubstantiated tales. I thought if there were a fascinating story to uncover, I would be the one to discover it. But little did I know that on that dark night, I would encounter something that defied explanation. As I walked through the large gates of the school, an eerie feeling washed over me. The building felt like a massive corpse, waiting to be explored. The front of the building was covered in dust, with shattered windows and cracked walls as if time had consumed it. The musty smell and the oppressive silence made me feel as though I had stepped into a space outside of time. I began walking down the long, empty corridor, with every step echoing through the air. The old doors were tightly shut, but there was a feeling that someone was watching me from behind. The air was thick, as though a foggy mist was enveloping everything around me. As I ventured deeper inside, I started hearing strange noises. At first, I thought it was just the wind or the sounds of objects moving in the vast space. But then, I heard a soft whisper, as though someone was calling my name. My heart raced, and I turned around, but no one was behind me. So, I continued forward, but the strange sensation kept rising inside me. I heard soft footsteps, as though someone was moving behind me. At that point, I wasn't so sure anymore. Everything in the building had a dark, mysterious aura. Determined to keep exploring, I climbed the old wooden staircase, each step creaking with age. The stairs seemed to bear the deep scars of time, as if they were trying to remind me of stories that could never be forgotten. Reaching the second floor, I came across an unlocked door that led into a dimly lit room. From within, I felt an unusual coldness, as though this room wasn't just part of the physical space but was also a place abandoned by time itself. The room appeared to have been abandoned for years, but what was strange was the large mirror hanging on the wall opposite the door. The mirror was covered in dust, but I could still see my reflection in it. I stepped closer, and as soon as I stood before the mirror, a chill ran down my spine. I saw myself in the mirror, but suddenly, the reflection began to change. The eyes in the mirror were no longer mine, they belonged to someone else. A man with pale skin, hollow eyes, and a vacant expression. I turned around, but no one was in the room. I looked back at the mirror, and this time, the reflection showed me standing right behind myself, not in the mirror anymore, but right behind me. My heart seemed to stop. The moment I turned around, I felt a terrible cold spread through my body. The room began to change, the walls seemed to tighten, and the space became cramped and suffocating. The musty smell and the eerie silence threatened to swallow me whole. Suddenly, I heard footsteps sounds coming from somewhere in the darkness. I turned, but saw nothing. I ran out of the room, but when I reached the door, I realized the door had disappeared. When had this door been locked shut? Everything in that room now seemed unexplainable, as if the building was playing games with me, pulling me into a world I couldn't escape. The footsteps grew louder, not just one person, but an entire crowd moving around me. Every time I turned, I saw shadowy figures appear and vanish in an instant. Panic began to spread through me, and I ran like mad, unable to stop, but every step felt hindered. I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder, and I jumped, turning around, but no one was there. I dashed into the hallway, but the place was no longer the same. Everything had changed, everything was unfamiliar. Finally, I burst out of the building, breathing in the fresh air, feeling as though I had escaped a nightmare. But when I turned to look back at the building for the last time, I saw a figure standing in the second-floor window. It was a man, with a pale face and hollow eyes. I stood frozen, unable to take my eyes off him. Then, I realized something strange, the man in the window was me. A feeling of horror consumed me, and I ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. When I finally left the house, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The walls, the whispers, the eerie laughter, all haunted my mind. I couldn't understand why those whispers made me feel as though I had lost control of myself. Why did I hear those voices, when clearly no one was there during the entire time? After returning home, I tried to research the old house. But there was no information about it online, no records of its history or any strange events related to it. The house seemed to have been forgotten by everyone, just like how those walls whispered about a past no one wanted to remember. I don't know if anyone else has experienced something similar to what I did, or if what I heard was just a trick of my imagination. but one thing I know for sure is that I'll never go back to that house. It's a memory that will haunt me for the rest of my life. And if you're hearing this story, I want to ask you, what do you think of what I encountered? Was it a supernatural phenomenon, or simply an overactive imagination? Please share your thoughts about this story in the comments below the video. I'd love to hear your opinions. Have you ever experienced strange occurrences in abandoned places or heard inexplicable sounds? Join me as we explore more mysteries, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next terrifying stories. Story 2, The Last Classroom. My name is Emily, and I am a history teacher at a small school located in the suburbs. This school has been around for nearly 100 years, but in recent years, the number of students has dwindled quickly. The atmosphere at the school has always carried a somber feeling, as if something is waiting, something that cannot be explained. I clearly remember an event that I still cannot forget to this day, an experience that changed the way I look at things I once believed in. This story took place last fall when the school began showing signs of deterioration. One morning, I was asked to help clean up an old classroom that was rarely used. This classroom was located at the end of the third-floor hallway, an area that was usually not visited by many people. I knew about this classroom, but had never entered it. In fact, no one could recall how long it had been abandoned since no one had used it anymore. Anyone who passed by it would feel a strange sensation, as if the room didn't belong to the school but to something forgotten long ago. When I entered the room, I immediately felt a difference compared to the other classrooms in the school. This classroom wasn't like anywhere I had been before. Although the light from the window was bright, the room still had a strange, eerie tone to it. The windows were covered in dust, but when I opened them, I saw the old curtains still fluttering lightly in the air, making strange sounds as if someone was breathing steadily right next to me. As I stepped inside, I began cleaning up piles of old books, torn historical maps, and faded handwritten boards. When I moved a desk, I noticed a small piece of paper wedged between the wooden layers of the desk. The paper had a handwritten note on it. The writing was messy and strange, as if someone had hurriedly written it in a panic. "Please don't enter this classroom. We can't get out anymore." Although I was a little confused, I dismissed it and thought it was just a prank from some student a long time ago. However, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The room not only had a strange appearance but seemed to have an unusual energy about it. Every time I moved around the room, I felt like someone was watching me. It was strange, but I couldn't explain why I had that sensation. The next day, I returned to the classroom to continue cleaning. This time, I brought a few students along to help. When we entered, I felt like there was a distinct change in the atmosphere. The windows were still shut, but the room seemed colder than it had been the day before. Suddenly, one of my students, Ben, pointed to the corner of the room and said, "Miss, Do you see something over there? I turned around, but saw nothing except the abandoned chairs. Ben continued. I saw a shadow, like someone was standing in that corner. Don't you see it? I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. It could just be the way the light was streaming through the window, casting a shadow on the wall. However, I couldn't deny that when I looked at the corner of the room, I felt something was wrong. Everything in the room seemed still, but there were countless inexplicable signs. As I continued dusting off the blackboards, I heard a faint sound coming from behind. It was clearly the sound of light footsteps, as if someone was walking around the room. But when I turned around, no one was there except my students. However, Ben spoke again. Miss, don't you hear it? There's someone in the room. I swallowed nervously, the chill creeping up my spine. The air in the room felt more suffocating than ever. By the middle of the afternoon, after we had cleaned most of the room, I decided to go up to the school's attic to look for some supplies. I asked the students to continue their work. As I stepped out into the hallway, I suddenly heard the sound of the classroom door opening. Turning around, I saw one of my students, Lisa, standing there with a pale face, staring at the room. You can't go in there anymore," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. I walked over to her and looked into her face. Her eyes were vacant, but in them was a great fear. Lisa continued. I saw shadows, they were standing behind you when you turned your back. My whole body froze. I turned around and saw the empty room, with no one inside. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me there, and I couldn't understand why that feeling was so strong. At that moment, one of the chairs in the classroom suddenly rolled forward, as if someone had shoved it. I lost my composure and told all the students to leave the room immediately. As we left, I heard a whisper coming from inside the classroom, a whisper as if someone was calling my name. The next day, I decided to learn more about the history of this classroom. After talking with one of the longtime teachers at the school, I learned a strange story. According to him, this classroom had once been the last classroom for a group of students in the 1950s. One afternoon, while the students were in this classroom, a serious accident occurred. A large storm knocked down a giant tree, causing the classroom's roof to collapse. All the students in that classroom were trapped and couldn't escape. Although workers came and saved some people, the others were never found. Since then, the classroom became a place haunted by the spirits of those unfortunate students. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. What terrified me was not what I saw, but what I didn't see, yet could feel so clearly. And since that day, every time I step into the school, I can't escape the feeling that someone is watching me from behind. The footsteps echoing in the hallway, the indistinct whispers. The last classroom remains a place I never want to return to. And if you've ever had a similar experience, or if you have thoughts about this story, don't hesitate to share your feelings in the comments below the video. Do you believe in such strange phenomena? Or do you have a similar story to share? Leave your thoughts, and we will continue to explore the mysteries in the next stories. Story 3, The Forgotten Door. Hello everyone, I'm Jake, a professional house repairman. My job can sometimes be quite boring and monotonous, but it's also full of interesting experiences that not everyone gets the chance to encounter. I often take on repair jobs from old houses, especially those with a long history and many strange stories. One of the jobs I took on last fall completely changed the way I view these old houses. It was a very old house, located on the outskirts, and it had a door that no one could remember why it had been locked for so many years. This house belonged to a wealthy family who had lived there for generations. However, at some point, the family had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a dusty and abandoned house. I was hired to repair some damages in the house, and my first job was to check out an old room on the lower floor, which had a large wooden door that had been locked tight for many years. That door always made me feel like something was off. I clearly remember the feeling when I first stood in front of it. The door seemed like it didn't belong to the house, the wood was rotting, and the hinges were rusty, as if it had been forgotten for a very long time. But what really made me uneasy was the sensation it gave off. It felt as though there was an invisible force holding it shut, as if the door didn't want to be opened. During the repairs, I noticed strange things starting to happen. First, there were strange noises I heard every time I entered the room. Small creaks, light footsteps, as if someone was moving in the darkness behind that door. I couldn't help but wonder, was there something truly behind that door, or was it just my imagination running wild due to the stories about the house? As I began to work, a strange, cold feeling surrounded the entire room. I decided that I had to open the door, despite the unease inside me. I tried with all my might to turn the key, and finally, the door creaked open with a dry crack. A cold breeze rushed out from inside the room, and I felt an immediate change. The air became thick, suffocating. When the door opened, I couldn't believe my eyes. Inside was a room that was completely different from the rest of the house. Unlike the other rooms in the house, this one was spotless, with no dust, no cracks, or signs of damage. Everything in the room was intact, as if time had stopped there. On the opposite wall, there was an old painting of the house's family, depicting them in formal clothing, standing in the garden behind the house. However, what struck me as odd was that the painting seemed to have been made long before the house was abandoned. The strange feeling made it impossible for me to take my eyes off the painting. I walked into the room and began inspecting everything. In the corner of the room, I found a small table with an old notebook on it. I opened it and discovered that it was the journal of one of the family members who had lived there. The pages were full of frantic, hurried writing, as if the writer couldn't control their fear. One entry made me shiver. I don't understand why we always feel like someone is watching us in this house. The door in my room always creaks at night, and there are strange sounds from behind that door. I'm starting to feel like I can't stay here any longer. Something has awakened in this house, something I can't see, but I can feel its presence. Those words made me even more anxious, and I began hearing strange sounds all around me. I turned around and saw the door I had just opened slowly closing by itself. The lock clicked, startling me. I quickly opened the door and turned back toward the outside room, but it seemed like something in the darkness was keeping me from escaping the feeling of being trapped. After leaving the room, I decided not to return there. But every time I came back to the house to work, I always felt a strange presence. The door remained shut, but I always felt as if it was watching me from behind. One evening, when I stayed late to finish my work, I began hearing strange footsteps around the house. At first, I thought it was my own footsteps, but then I realized it wasn't. The footsteps were coming from behind the forgotten door. I couldn't resist my curiosity and decided to return once more. When I opened the door, the room looked the same, but the family's painting had changed. The people in the painting were no longer standing upright like before. They seemed to be looking at me with eyes full of haunting intensity. A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly closed the door. But from inside the room, I heard a very faint voice, echoing in the silent air. We never left. The next day, I decided not to return. The work in this house had too many unexplainable strange occurrences. However, after I left, I heard from a friend who works in real estate that the house had been sold to a new family. They moved in and began fixing things up. And, according to my friend, the new family left very quickly, only after a week of living there. They never explained why, but I have a feeling they went through things I wouldn't dare imagine. Since then, I've never gone back to that house. It still stands there, like a secret buried under the dust of time. And now, I want to know how you feel. If any of you have ever experienced strange things in old houses or weird doors, don't hesitate to share your thoughts by leaving a comment below. Let me know how you feel. Would you be ready to step through that door, or would you walk away, just like I did? Story 4, The Abandoned Hospital. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah, and I'm a journalist who specializes in writing about abandoned places. This job isn't easy, but I enjoy the thrill of uncovering the stories behind these places. Specifically, I'm fascinated by exploring abandoned hospitals. These places are always filled with mysteries and, sometimes, inexplicable stories. One time, I received a tip from a friend who had worked at a large hospital on the outskirts of the city. It was said that the hospital had been closed for a long time, but no one really knew why. There were rumors that strange things had happened there, from unexplained disappearances to bizarre phenomena. My friend warned me not to go, but I couldn't resist the curiosity. So, I decided to go there alone, with my camera and pen in hand, ready to explore what was hidden inside. The abandoned hospital was located on the outskirts, far from the city center. When I arrived, the hospital appeared as a dark ruin in the fading light of the evening. The crumbling walls, broken glass windows, and the long shadows of trees casting on the ground created a scene that could not have been more eerie. Everything there seemed frozen in time, and I felt a chill rise up from the ground. I began to enter through the main door, which was locked, but I easily found an entrance through a broken window. At first, all I could hear was the wind and the screeching sound of dry branches. But as soon as I stepped inside, a heavy feeling overcame me. It felt like someone was watching me, and I couldn't shake that thought. Everything was eerily silent, to the point where it was almost unimaginable. The first strange thing I noticed was that pieces of paper, signs, and medical supplies were still intact. It seemed as if no one had touched these things in years. I continued deeper into the building, through long and dark hallways, with weak light streaming through cracked windows. But the further I went, the more I felt an odd presence. Though no one was there, I could hear strange noises, gentle knocks on the walls, small footsteps, and even something that sounded like breathing, very close. As I passed a series of patient rooms, I discovered a special treatment room with its door still intact. The items inside were preserved as if the hospital had only just closed yesterday. But there was one thing that caught my attention. A hospital bed was still neatly made with a white sheet, as if someone had just been lying on it. A strange feeling rose within me, and I felt my blood run cold. Suddenly, I heard a small noise from behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. I continued walking, feeling more anxious. I reached an old clinic room and saw some old medical instruments, as if they had been left there for a long time. But the odd thing was that one of the medical tools, a syringe, seemed to have been used, even though no one was around. I couldn't make sense of it. How could these things still be here, and why did it feel like everything was being watched? I suddenly became tense, and a sensation that something was approaching me from the distant shadows intensified. I moved on into unfamiliar areas of the hospital, and then I came to a door that was tightly shut. My heart raced, but I decided to open it and step inside. Behind the door was a staircase leading down to the basement. A dark and cold space where I couldn't see clearly. I had to turn on my flashlight, but the weak light was only enough to reveal the cracked walls and broken debris underfoot. As I descended, I heard a rustling sound from a dark corner. I stopped, but the noise kept going, getting closer and closer. I tried to move faster, but the sensation that someone was following me grew stronger. Then, in a terrifying moment, I saw the faint silhouette of a person standing at the end of the hallway. They didn't move, but I could feel the cold stare from them. Not knowing what I was doing, I panicked and ran up the stairs. At that moment, I heard a soft laugh, as if someone was standing right behind me. I didn't dare look back, I just ran for my life out of the building. When I finally reached safety, I looked back and saw the hospital, silent, as if no one had ever been inside. But the strange thing was, when I looked back again, I noticed a window on the top floor of the hospital, the one I had just passed, was now wide open. The window had never been open when I entered, and now it was ajar. I couldn't understand it. A week after I left the hospital, I got a call from an old friend. They told me I should be careful with what I had uncovered, because after I left, a few other people went to the hospital, and they never returned. What terrified me the most was when I checked my camera footage. Although it didn't capture much, in one of the shots, I saw a faint figure standing by the window, even though no one was standing there when I filmed. It was the image of a doctor, with a cold and fearful stare, staring directly at me. So the question still remains, was what I experienced real? Or was I just haunted by the bizarre stories from the hospital's past? And you, if you've ever had strange experiences with abandoned places, please share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of what I went through? Would you dare to step into a place like this? Leave your comments below. Story 5, The Forgotten Asylum. Hello everyone, I'm Michael, a professional urban explorer specializing in abandoned places. But today, I'm not here to just talk about crumbling walls or dark hallways. The story I'm about to share with you is not one of my usual adventures. This is the story of a place I discovered through a strange rumor from a friend. He told me that in a remote area, there was an abandoned psychiatric hospital that had been left standing for a long time, with no one really knowing why it had been abandoned. Even to this day, no one dares to go near it because of the strange stories told about it. I'm not someone who believes in ghost stories, but after hearing these tales, my curiosity pushed me to uncover the truth. Although many people had reported strange occurrences there, I was determined to go there alone, bring my camera, and find out for myself. It was a decision I would never forget. When I arrived, the sky was beginning to darken. The large gate of the asylum seemed to swallow me into a space filled with stillness. This place was far from any village, deep in the woods, and it seemed like time had stopped here a long time ago. The rusted iron gate was locked tightly, but I found a gap large enough to slip through. As I stepped past the gate, a cold breeze brushed my face, causing a shiver to run down my spine. I couldn't sense any life around me, only an eerie silence that enveloped everything. The towering buildings of the asylum stood like ghosts, with crumbling walls, shattered windows, and discarded objects scattered everywhere. It was a terrifying sight, but not the thing that worried me the most. Venturing deeper into the building, I noticed something strange about the atmosphere. The paintings on the walls were faded and stained by time, but there was one particular painting that caught my attention. It depicted a man sitting in a chair, his face obscured by shadows, but his eyes seemed to be staring directly at me. A strange feeling crept over me, but I couldn't stop myself. I kept moving deeper into the building. As I entered more rooms, I began to feel a difference in the space. The objects inside the rooms were still intact, from hospital beds to old mattresses, even bottles of leftover medication. But the deeper I went, the more I felt like someone was watching me, even though I couldn't see anyone. I paused to check the walls and items, and suddenly I heard a small sound, like hurried footsteps. I turned around, but saw nothing except the empty rooms. Then the footsteps echoed again, this time louder, as if someone was approaching me. A wave of anxiety began to grow inside me. I didn't know what was happening, but one thing was clear: I wasn't alone here. I continued further, and soon I reached another area. A long, dark hallway with tightly closed doors. But one of the doors was slightly ajar, and a dim light leaked out from inside. It was a special room, with a large hospital bed sitting in the middle of the room. On the bed was a blanket, but something was off. The blanket was disturbed, as if someone had just been lying there. I stepped inside and stood quietly, staring at the bed. Then, a cold gust of wind blew through, and I felt as if someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. The space was empty, but the feeling of being watched lingered from the shadows. I decided to leave the room, but when I returned to the hallway, I noticed something odd. The doors I had passed through earlier were now shut. I had only walked a short distance, but it felt like everything had changed. A sense of unease swept over me, and I began to feel an invisible presence around me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I was being pulled towards something, though I couldn't understand why. I started to run, not daring to look back, desperate to get out of there as quickly as possible. But every time I glanced behind, I saw faint shadows moving through the hallways, and I could hear the sound of laughter echoing from somewhere in the darkness. It didn't feel like imagination. I knew I wasn't alone there. When I finally found the exit, I sprinted toward the main gate. But as I stepped outside, I turned around and looked back. I saw a dim light coming from the second-floor window of the building. The door to that room, however, was closed. But there was a figure standing in the window, motionless. I couldn't shake the cold feeling and the emptiness that place had left behind. As I left, I couldn't help but feel like I had narrowly escaped something truly dangerous. But the question still echoed in my mind: was what I experienced an illusion? Or did I really encounter something unexplainable? The scene still haunts me to this day. Perhaps I saw a ghost, or maybe it was just the imagination of someone under intense stress. But I can't deny that strange feeling, and what I witnessed has made it impossible for me to forget. If you've ever experienced strange phenomena in abandoned places, don't hesitate to share your story in the comments below. What do you think of what I went through? Leave your thoughts in the comments and join me as we uncover more of the mysteries this world is hiding. Thank you for watching and joining us in today's chilling stories. Do you believe in the strange phenomena that occur in abandoned buildings? Or have you ever experienced a nightmare like this? We would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and personal experiences. Don't forget to leave your comments below the video, and if you haven't already, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Whispers in the Dark channel so you never miss a story. Stay in the light, and remember, the darkness is always out there, waiting for you to explore.